Ladies and gentlemen, on the line from Northside Long Beach, I have Sleepy. Give everybody a breakdown of where you grew up.
I grew up on the north side of Long Beach. My hood is called Boulevard Mafia Crip. And it's kind of a unique situation because I gravitated to the homies from Compton. So I rep Compton, but at the same time, it's Boulevard over everything. And as far as my younger childhood, that was kind of like, crazy because I spent 9 years in the foster home, in and out of juvenile halls. I was in McLaren Hall. I actually got a lawsuit against them. So it was kind of crazy until my mom settled down in North Long Beach.
Talk to me about foster care. What was that? I'm assuming it was a rough time, but can you give us your experience being in the foster system?
It's crazy. Me and my sister, her name is Tanya. She's 3 years older than me, and we first got put into a foster home when I was 3 years old. And I have a vivid memory of what do they call them? The social workers taking us to the foster home that was in Palmdale, actually Lino, next to Little Rock, California. And I remember being in a car at 3 years old, crying, not wanting to go to the house or whatever, wanted to go back home to my mom. And it was like trying to convince me to come in. Like throwing a tantrum. And I took off all my clothes in the car. I'm like, I ain't going nowhere, But you know what? For those 9 years that I stayed with my foster family, and their name was Bill and Susan Smith, I couldn't ask for anything more. Actually, kind of wish I would have stayed because, I would have been more on a productive and positive path in my future. But that experience with them was lovely. Now, when we get into placements, boys' homes, McLaren Hall, that's when the story starts to get kind of like crazy and
I've heard a lot about McLaren Hall, so much so that they have several lawsuits against them from Can you break down your time in McLaren Hall and what you know about this lawsuit situation?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I'm part of a lawsuit against them, and I was in McLaren Hall, 1981. My pop had just died, got killed actually, got stabbed, and so my mom I came back home after the 9 years in foster home, and for whatever reason, I got kicked out again. And I was only like 11 years old. So, went to children's court, juvenile court, and I met a guy that said he was in McLaren Hall, and he talked it up and said, like, we got this, we got pool, we got games, So as a kid, I'm like, oh, that's what I want to be. So, convinced my lawyer to tell the judge to, send me to McLaren Hall. Went to McLaren Hall. It was cool at first. But then I started seeing all the craziness, all the manipulation from the staff, orchestrating fights, abuse, shit like that, I had many fights in there that was orchestrated by staff, seeing little people getting beat up because we got weights in there. So you had guys that was like, I believe it was from like a toddler, an infant, because we had infants in there too, all the way up to like, 17, 18. Damn. Yeah. And it's a big, very big complex. And so you can have these guys of like 17, 18 with these big 22, size arms, bullying guys that was like 11, 12, just to shits and giggles, just to, amuse the staff. And That's the type of shit that was going on in there, and worse, because we had females too. We had 3 dorms for the guys, and we had 3 dorms for the girls. It was Tigers. It was, what was it? The Tigers, the junior boys, and the senior boys. And then for the girls, it was the Pixies, the junior girls, and the senior girls. And sometimes we had dances, we mingled, we had, co-ed events. But then when things started getting a little shady, you see the staff taking advantage of the young girls. It was crazy. It was like, at that time, you don't know. You're not really consciously aware of what was actually going on, but we felt like something seemed right, So I witnessed all that.
Man, I hope you get what's coming to you and what you should get in that respect. Let's take it. Let's go back a little more. I want to know what Compton and Northside Long Beach was like in the 70s and early 80s through your eyes.
Okay, as far as the 70s, like I said, I was in and out of the foster home and boys' home. But when I used to come home to live with my mom for the summer or holidays, they moved around a lot because of her husband at the time, after my pops. He was a traveling manager at, I don't know if you remember, what was it called? Was it National Lumber or something like that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So they used to send him to different locations, different stores. So we lived in the jungles. We lived in the jungles when those bloods over there was going, starting to rise up. Lived in Norwalk, lived in East Long Beach, and we lived in the valley. So we stayed all over a lot, and so I got to see, quite a bit, we used to seeing guys with these member-owned jackets and these Godfathers, and I'm just thinking they either part of the Black Panthers or just just cool guys, and if you remember, or you heard the story back then, the Black Panthers used to have a free lunch program, so
yep.
I used to partake in that and enjoy that experience with that. But I like to say I grew up on both sides of the tracks because my foster parents, even though they were Black, they were middle class, and so they were very well educated. And so when I was with them, living out there in Little Rock, it was diverse, right? So, and surprisingly, the white people out there, they love to be gracious. He was like, one of my first girlfriends was white. And I used to go over my white friend's house a lot. There were Native Americans out there. And like my second girlfriend, she was Native American. And so I never really had that racial, that racist experience against me, not until later on down the line, But I like, that's why I say I like to say I grew up on both sides of the tracks because I experienced, well diverse groups of people before I moved to the hood.
Take us back to, when you just decided to jump off the porch and say, man, the streets are just too enticing. Let me see what that's about.
Well, okay. So on one of my first travels back home, my mom moved to 68th and Orcutt. That's on the north side of Long Beach. Mm-hmm. Right in Boulevard Hood, right? So when I first, like you said, jumped off the porch, my first thing to do was hustle. I was always trying to hustle. So my thing was, I'm gonna go up to this gas station and pump gas for some change, for arcade money or whatever, send some honey buns and zoom zooms and wham wham. And little beknownst to me, there were younger guys that were already from the Boulevard up there pumping gas too. And the first guy I met was one of my day ones named J-Bone, Big J-Bone, Joseph. And we met, and from there, it was on. And then I went back to Boys Home, spent another, 6 months or whatever, ironically back in Palmdale. And then I finally came home, and my mom moved on 69th Way and Long Beach Boulevard.
Are you talking about J-Bone? Are you talking about J-Bone from Four Corner?
No. Big J-Bone from Boulevard.
Oh, okay. Apologies. My apologies.
No. You good. And so when I came back home, my mom moved on 69th Way and Long Beach Boulevard. It seemed like, even though it was like a 12-unit apartment, everybody from the hood, that was the spot to go. That was the spot to hang out at, and my neighbors was my homie, KT. Now, when you ask about me, jumping off the porch and getting involved in the hood, I remember the first day when I came back from foster home, and I went to the store. It had to be like, early in the morning or whatever. And in that store, it was called Larry's Liquor Store at the time. And we had arcade games, Pac-Man, Galaxy, Defender. And so I remember walking into the store, and I looked to my right, and I seen this dude, man. I ain't never, this is shit that you see like in one of those like black exploitation movies or whatever. Dude, I seen like he had some 501s creased up, some black chucks, hat laces, Batman jacket. I don't know if you remember Batman jackets. And he had his afro, but he had it in a hairnet with an OG golf hat. And his posture. And I'm like 12 years old. And I looked at that image and I'm like, nigga, that's who I want to be right there, man. Found out that was my neighbor named KT. And from there, he was a big influence on who I am, who I was, who I wanted to be, representing, my section.
Tell me, and I asked Capone this question as well. Shout out to Capone, man. But what do you remember? What do you remember about when crack really hit the city? From your eyes, how did the city change? Did you dabble in crack sales and all that?
Yeah, and that's crazy because again, I'm like 13, 14, and me and Capone, he sings, and I used to sing too, and my sister used to sing. So we still, all we did was as youngsters, it was kind of like out of that movie, Coolie High. All we done was sing gangster shit, And then the next thing you know, it was like, zombies walking around, and it was like, what the hell is this, And the first thing that we noticed was one of my homeboys, a reputable, I ain't gonna say his name, but he was like zombied out, and the cool thing about it was he was like selling like trail mix, like the coconut out of trail mix, and he got the hood shot up.
Wow.
Fake crack. Yeah, and that's how serious it was. It just didn't hit like it didn't just take time for it to damage the hood. It hit the hood, and then people were affected negatively immediately. They start doing shit that they never was doing 24 hours ago. But so my first experience of selling crack was like what, 85, and I wasn't really experienced. It's like I sold weed before, but in selling crack, it was like so much money. You like kind of like overwhelmed with like all this fast money, and as a youngster, that's all you see. It's like, oh man, this gonna do, great things and put money in my pocket. I can buy this, I can buy that, but then you start seeing the negative effects, especially in our hood. We were like the first hoods where our projects actually got shut down by the police because all the crack that it affected in a negative way in our section. It was terrible. People wasn't paying their rent. Paying for food. First time I had experience with a strawberry. I know you know what a strawberry is.
Of course, man. A hooker, prostitute, selling it for the rock, right?
Exactly, man. And people used to, bring us their valuables, their heirlooms, had, collectible guns and just selling anything and everything out of their house. And the cool thing about it was you see, at the time when you're young, you think it's funny, but in the back of your mind, you're like, you can feel that something ain't right when you got these strawberries that will literally do the nastiest thing for crack. And I'm talking about, I don't even really want to go into detail, but they would do just about anything. Just about anything.
Watch Snowfall. Anybody out there? Pretty accurate representation from what I heard.
Exactly. We talking about bestiality and all, toilet games, all kind of little crazy shit, man. And it was sick. And it's like, we was just exposed to that shit. And and if anybody say, you lived through that, you experienced that, whether you used or you sold, and you think that don't affect you to this day, you're crazy. That was just too much because basically all of us was young. I don't care what age range you were in, we're all youngsters, and somehow that is going to affect you somehow later on down the line.
What was your interaction like with the Long Beach Police Department when you were active out there in the street?
Well, you want to talk about Bowline? I don't know if you ever heard of Bowline and Scarface and Bowline and Heckle and Jekyll.
Those are those are nicknames for cops, right?
Exactly.
Talk about it. Talk to it.
These guys, man. Like, it's funny how you see all these movies with all these crooked cops that's doing. They get those storylines from proof, pieces and bits from here and there. Bowline, Scarface, Heckle and Jekyll. These was a typical prototype of crooked cops. Abusive cops. They would jack you up. And if they knew that you was, selling crack, you was making a lot of money or whatever, they would take your dope money. And then if you said anything about it, they would make it look like they would pick you up, take you in an alley that they know everybody will walk down and make it look like you're snitching. If you know what I'm saying, if you fight back or whatever. Or, and LAPD did this too. They would, like, if they had a problem with you, like I said, you fought back with them or whatever, they will put you in the car, handcuff you, put you in the car, and if you was a Crip, they would deliberately drop you off in the Blood neighborhood.
Famous scene
and vice versa.
Society.
Exactly. That's why I say these movies, they tell the truth to a certain extent. They, they take pieces of real life storylines and experiences and implement them in their movies, but they get them from somewhere. They get them from what actually happened, and they were doing that. LAPD and Long Beach Police were, whether you were the Blood if they had a problem with you, they would drop, or just for shits and giggles, just for fun, they would just drop you off in the Crip neighborhood. You know, and a lot of these wars, you think it started by the individuals that's in these gangs? No, a lot of these wars started from police. They would dress up and go in different neighborhoods and hit up their enemy hoods on walls, and I think it's been proven too. But they will actually actively shoot at gang members and yell out other neighborhoods. So a lot of these gang wars were perpetuated by either the police or the government, and so yeah, it was a rough time, and these were the days where we were young and trying to have fun, doing silly shit like riding an RTD on the back of the bus. And I'm not talking about the rough, tough, and dangerous, baby. And I'm not talking about inside the back of the bus. I'm talking about on the outside of the back of the bus to get a free ride.
That's crazy. Yep, I remember doing that as a child.
Exactly. You know, building mini bikes and choppers, and you know, these are supposed to be our childhood, where we outside playing baseball in the street, football in the street. You don't see that no more. You know, but they diluted all that with a deliberate plan to destroy communities.
Man, I like where this conversation is going. You know, I have a side question for you, and all due respect to the homies on the red side, much love, but I have a question for you. Why do you think Long Beach has never had an established blood set in the city?
Well, there's obviously been bloods that lived in Long Beach. I could say there was a conscious effort by every city, every gang in Long Beach to vow to never have bloods in that city. But I think that would be a stretch, because I don't remember any meeting from every gang, every head of every gang getting together and say, yeah, we're going to vow to never have bloods in our neighborhood. I don't think that. I just think it was one of those things that developed. You know, just because certain things just happen. You know, I don't think there's a reasonable explanation, because, like I said, there was blood living in Long Beach, just like there's blood living in Long Beach now. But as far as a gang being created, I think it was just one of those things. That's just my opinion. Maybe, you know, there was some type of secret meeting or whatever, you know, that I don't know about. But every gang, damn near every gang in Long Beach had kind of created its own section in Long Beach. So there was really, I don't think, no room for anybody else to come in unless she was doing a takeover. And that damn sure wasn't going to happen, you know. So I just think it was a freak, coincidence that it just never happened like that. You know, if that's the right word.
Okay. You know, there's a famous video on YouTube that is going to live in infamy. And I saw it years before I even, knew who you were, and pleasure to meet you, and all that. But there's a famous video of a party with the Boulevard Mafia Crips and some Compton Crips at the Shangri-La.
Yeah,
that's in Long Beach, right? Yeah. Was that in Long Beach?
That's in our hood, right there on the corner of.
Yeah, tell us about that night, and then tell us about the Shangri-La. How did that whole thing come together? That's a very cool. I'm gonna post the link in the description, but it's just a great snapshot in history, man. And just the fact that someone had a video camera and was going around and videotaping this. But talk to me about that night and when you found out you were in the video and all that stuff, man.
Yeah, first, well, I got to rewind it back to how I was reminded and being shown that video, because I was kind of going through a depression, and my mom moved to Minnesota back in 88, and when she moved, she forgot all our pictures, all our younger pictures. So I was like feeling like I didn't exist before a certain period of time, because I didn't have any younger pictures. So I was telling my homeboy, I'm like, my homeboy Ed, I was like, hey, man, I ain't got no younger pictures of myself, man. I'm like, man, I don't even feel like I existed before. He like, what you talking about? Have you watched this? And he put on the video and it says DMC NAC. And I'm watching the video, I'm watching, and then all of a sudden, my little young goofy self just pops on the screen, and I'm like, oh shit! It was actually 1986, and the homie Bodacious from N Hood took the video. And, you know, it was just one of those nights where our hoods got together. And the backstory of our hood is, yes, we were a gang neighborhood, whatever, but we were more like a family community. We were more like tight knit and together. Everybody knew each other. Your moms was like my moms. So we were basically one big like family, you know, and that's how we did it. You know, somebody put on some music, just like basically probably any of the black neighborhoods, or, you know, you put on some music and everybody's going to party. And that's what we did that night. And it was just fortunate enough that the homie Buzz and Tix filmed it. And it just popped up recently on YouTube, and it was like, oh, wow. And you see everybody, you know, as themselves, you know, as youngsters, and including myself. And then when I seen it, it was like, oh wow, that was me. And when I watched the video, I went to the comment section, and people were like, you know, they were kind of like we got a lot of love. It was like people were wondering if we're still alive, you know. People were like, you don't see no cell phones, and just commenting on the different time period opposed to what's going on now when people try to throw parties or whatever. And it was like, you know, something that I was proud to be in, you know.
Man, what do you remember about that night? What was the vibe like? You know, I mean, what was you guys drinking, smoking? Like, just, you know, talk to me about that whole vibe, man. Because I'm watching the video right now, and it's just a trip seeing it.
And well, when I watched it the first time, it jogged my memory back, because I could not remember. I could not remember that video existed. I didn't even remember that night until I watched the video, and then it all came back to me. And like I said, it was actually really a spontaneous thing. It was just a spontaneous thing to where the homie Tick and Buzz had a camera, and their hood, neighborhood Compton Crip, and our hood, Boulevard Mafia, we were already tight knit at that time. And it was just a spontaneous moment to where music was put on, and drinks, we was drinking, smoking, which I don't really smoke at all, you know, but we were just having good time that night. It was like, man, you know, we wasn't stressed about anything, you know. It was all love, and you know, even me, you can see me clowning, you know. It's just put it like this: whether you was hard, you know, this hard, tough gang member, you was a G or trying to be a G, that night you were really yourself, and enjoyed who you really are, as far as being around people who you felt love from, and enjoyed the company and good music. And that was the vibe. That was the vibe, man. The vibe was, you know, an enjoyable night, you know.
I'm sure there were a lot of good times, you know, being a part of a group, being part of a gang, but there were probably an equal amount, if not more, bad times. Is it, looking at this video now, are there people, and you don't have to name names or anything like that, but are there people in this video that aren't around because they lost their life to the streets or drugs or anything like that?
Yeah. The man, I want to say maybe six people that was in that video we recently just lost. Recently.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's crazy because you see them as their younger self, and you think they're gonna be around. You don't, you know. And then also in this gang culture, where a lot of violence and death, we become desensitized. You know, and it's sad to say we kind of get desensitized even with the people that we love, and you know, it's like okay, you know, we hurt, but it doesn't affect us like probably a normal citizen or whatever. But when you look back at that footage and those people who recently died, it kind of hits you like, damn, man, it's like, you know, it kind of touches you kind of different, you know. But yeah, about like 5 or 6 just recently within a couple of like this past couple of years from that footage passed, I believe.
Yeah. R.I.P. My condolences.
Yes, man.
Would you say that the average gang member, former gangbanger who is really out there, heavy, hard in the streets, suffers from PTSD?
Oh yeah, most definitely, most definitely. There's no way that you can experience, and I'm not even talking about home. I'm not even talking about what's going on inside the home, just the streets, period. There's no way that you can grow up and experience all that negative energy and destruction, death, whatever you want to call it, man, the drug effects. There's no, and we're talking about people that you grew up with, that you love, they loved you, and you see them fall one after another. There's no way you're not going to be affected. Period. Just like a soldier going to Vietnam or Iraq, you know, there's no way. You know, if you're a human being and you're not emotionally deficient, you know, you're going to be affected. You know, we all humans. We're not robots, and we're going to have some type of emotional, psychological damage, and that's why people try to escape with drugs and alcohol. You know, they try to escape all that, but you can't really escape. You know, and I wish, you know, I used to be against therapy, and as far as in the I don't know. Typical, the Hollywood sense or whatever, but talking about your problems, talking to someone about what you're going through, every human needs that.
I agree, homie.
You know?
I 100% support therapy. Shit, to this day, I see a therapist, you know, for shit that just you need to talk to people about, right?
And yeah, and I'm glad you agree because. Which leads me to this. I wish, as you know, older homeboys, they and now me, I wish we were like the person that the younger people, the younger generation can go to and talk to. It's like, do you remember that song by Tupac that said, he says, homies in the hood make you feel good?
That lyric sounds familiar.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's so many tears or something like that. But it's like if you ask any gang members, who in the hood, whether it's your young homeboys or your big homeboys, who in the hood that you can go to with any problems that you having that you feel comfortable to talking to till the end of time, okay? Yeah, and you ask, like I say, if you ask any younger homeboys who in their hood that's older, that they feel comfortable, that they can go to and talk to about any problems that they having, and don't feel judged, don't feel that they're going to, you know, spread whatever you talked about, that you feel comfortable. Who in the hood that you. And it's going to be probably like 1% if zero, if any. There's, you know, as homeboys, gang members, if we really love our homeboys, we should really be there and not leave them to their own device, especially if they're making the same mistakes that you make. You know, we should embrace our young homeboys that's going astray and like, look, I've been down this path. This ain't the way to go. This gonna lead to this. This gonna lead to that, and you don't want that later on because you're gonna have a lot of regret. But there's no and I take accountability too. It's like we should be guiding our little homeboys better. That's all I wanted to say about that.
That's deep, man. And I think with your podcast coming up, that should be one of your missions, if not your niche, homie, your podcast niche. Be that 1% of the big homie that these kids can reach out to if they need to. Exactly. Just this conversation we've had past 30 minutes or whatever, it's just like, man, I could see this change in a kid's life, especially if they reach out directly to you and you reach back out to them, or you tell a story on your podcast about something that happened to you. I mean, that's really important, man. That's dope. I'm glad you have that vision. We're going to talk about your podcast in a bit, but I have one more journey in your life that I want to go down before we talk about that, and that is your unfortunate journey through the prison system. Talk to us about your time in prison. First of all, how many years would you say you've given to the system?
In and out. If you want to include juvenile, maybe like 85-90% of my life, man. I what they call it institutionalized institution. Well, I was institutionalized, but the funny thing about me and how my mind operated, I was more active in jail for whatever reason. I don't know. On the street, I was, I guess, trying to figure myself out because I kept getting pushed out of, my home or whatever. So my mind was all over the place and couldn't really adapt to certain things right there on the spot. But in jail, I was like, I felt like I flourished. It's like, that was my thing. Not that I liked the jail. It was just that I adapted well from, growing up in an institution so long. Yeah.
What are some of the facilities that you've been locked up in?
All right. So we already talked about McLaren Hall. I was in LP, Los Latrinas, Central Juvenile Hall, Stillmore. The funny thing is, for some or whatever reason, they skipped me and sending me to YA, but I went straight to prison. But I also went to, as well as a juvenile, I went to Camp Scott and Camp Miller. So, like I said, I missed YA for whatever reason, and they sent me straight to prison. And as far as prison goes, I started off with reception, Tehachapi, Avenal, Folsom Level 4, opened up Calipat State Prison, CRC, Chino West, Chino East. I'm trying to remember at least two more. Mill Creek. Yeah, so I was up and down California.
Explain what life is like as an active gang member in a Folsom Level 4.
Well, for me, it's a saying goes, you don't start nothing, it won't be nothing. You mind your business and you stay out of bullshit. As far as racial tension and riots and all that, yeah, you were like, anybody would have the jitters or whatever, the what they call it, the butterflies or whatever. but you adapted to the intensity. You adapted to, how far the things go, whatever. And for me, like I said, being institutionalized, it was just, I don't know. I don't want to say that I felt like that was my home, but I felt comfortable. I felt comfortable in the prison, and the surroundings, everything that goes on in that environment. It can be scary at times, because the first time I went to Folsom, level 4 beef facilities, I remember me and the homies was at the basketball court, and we seen some ruckus in the whites and the Mexican side of the yard. And the next thing you know, guys walking around the court, walking around the track, and Mexican guy. And next thing you know, you just seen all his fucking insides. That's just,
wow.
He's trying to hold himself in. He's trying to hold his stomach in, his abdomen in. Ooh. But you just seen all that shit. And this is what I mean about desensitized, because the only proper way for me to not be like, overwhelmed, with shock or whatever, I just started shooting jokes. I just like, what the fuck? You think he gonna fucking sew himself up? But deep inside, I was like, nigga, it's real up in this motherfucker. Shut the fuck up, But that was my first thing. It's like I'll take you back. So New Folsom, as you probably know, is right next to Old Folsom.
Okay.
And old Folsom is like, man, I don't know how old that place is, right? But when you drive up to it, it looked like this old township castle, right? And don't nothing but murders going on in that motherfucker, right? And you as a youngster, it's just known to be intimidated. It's just like, damn, man, I'm going up in there. And like I said, how I deal with it is sense of humor. And I'm like, man, is this what they talking about? This motherfucker look like Castle Grayskull on He-Man. I had to bust laughing and shit. But deep inside, I was like, I don't want to go to this motherfucker, but they sent me to New Folsom right across the street, beef facility, but that was just as dangerous too, because at that time they had transferred a large portion of people that was in Old Folsom over to beef facility because due to a riot, racial riot that had took place.
Damn. Yeah, man. Do you have I know you mentioned you remember Eazy-E being around. Capone told us his story about being in the studio when Eazy first started messing around with the idea of singing Boys in the Hood, because HBO, the group that was supposed to sing it, wasn't feeling the Six Foes and the Jerry curls and the references and things like that. But do you remember Eazy-E coming around the hood back in the day?
Yeah, well, see, we know him as Eric. I know he's, people know his government, but that's who we knew him by, as Eric. Like Capone was saying, his first or second baby mama is my homegirl Joyce, which is from my hood. Our brothers are from my hood, and so Joyce and Eric had a spot in the it was called the Shirley Towers, right across the street from the Shangri-Las where that party took place. So we would see Eric all the time, picking up Joyce or taking Joyce home or just hanging out or whatever. Plus, we knew Eric through his cousin, rest in peace. Before I knew Eric, I knew his cousin, which led to him being in the position where he was at, which was Horace. His cousin Horace was cool as fuck. Rest in peace. So Eric used to come to the hood all the time. And the last time I had seen him, I was standing on the corner of 69th Way and Long Beach Boulevard, selling. And he was waiting on Joyce to come out of the apartments. And just like Cass said, we know him, and just like the movie or whatever, we know him as being, this big drug dealer, which he was. And so I'm like, hey, man, dude, man, let me, sell a couple of packs for you, whatever. And I mean, the last thing he said, didn't know what the hell he was talking about, but he was like, no, I'm about to get out the game, man. I'm going to start doing this little music shit. And that was the last thing he said to me. And next thing I know, he's blown up as Eazy-E, Unfortunately, I wasn't there at the, studio when all that transpired with Capone and HBO and all that, but we heard about it, and, those are facts, even though I didn't witness, but those are facts. It's known around the hood. So,
man, that's crazy. Let's wrap it up by talking about your podcast, man. I know you're in the beginning stages of it. What's your mission with it? What are some of your ideas? Do you have a name for it yet?
All right, so I started off as the Snapback Show. If you go on my YouTube channel, I'll have 3 interviews up there, I believe. And I was doing everything myself, trying to learn how to interview, learn how to edit, and trying to get the right cameraman. And then I just do the work and everything else. Kind of got discouraged because I couldn't learn. I didn't feel that I was putting up quality content as far as the editing go, right? But now, I think things are coming into place, and now I want to also create, along with my street interviews, I'm in the works of creating a podcast with Capone and maybe my homeboy Footy. I'll collaborate with my homeboy Foots Productions, who shoot lowrider functions. And so I think I'm gonna just keep the name the Snapback Show. Because I like the name. It's very catchy, and the theory behind, the thought behind that name is when I wanted to do interviews and ask these questions of these social issues that's going on, my goal is I wanted to try to snap people back to reality, because I feel a lot of people are living in delusion. Whether it's designed by music or entertainment, whatever, in the water, in the air, or whatever. I feel a lot of people are living in delusion and going by a narrative that's fitting the higher ups, the powers that be. So I wanted to snap people back to some type of normalcy, and that's why that's the purpose of calling it the Snapback Show.
I like that, man. You have my full support. Whenever, like I said, we'll sit down or have a conversation, I would definitely love to help you in any way I could. Get a bunch of questions together, man, and I'm an open book. I'll definitely help you out. We'll get together offline. But is there any shout-outs you want to give, man, or any tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, man. You can find me on YouTube, the Snapback Show, Instagram, TikTok, and like I said, I'm in the works of putting more content up, and also, I do DJ on the side, so I go by DJ Wingman also. But I want to give a shout out to my boy Big Capone, for hooking us up, man, and telling a factual story. A lot of these podcasts and YouTubers, they telling stories that's either embellished or, secondhand stories or whatever, but I want to get props, what I'm saying? And to you know what I'm saying, for keeping it real and keeping, trying to get authentic and genuine, real guys that was living these moments and having these experiences on these streets and giving them a platform to tell their real stories, I also want to give a shout out to my homie KT,
man, dog, yes, thank you, sir. Man. It's definitely a pleasure, man. I look forward to staying in touch with you, and hit me up anytime, like I said, all right?
All right, same as well.
I'll talk to you soon, man. Peace, dog.
Peace.